Most people have heard of kamikaze pilots, young men tasked with crashing their explosive-laden planes into enemy warships. These pilots were ideally meant to accurately target important ship components, inflicting more damage than a traditional bombing run. Furthermore, the Japanese command believed that the display of a kamikaze pilot willingly sacrificing themselves would demoralize the enemy. However, a less discussed aspect is what happened when these missions failed. The fate of a kamikaze pilot who either missed their target or simply hesitated remains a neglected historical question. As of 1944, the tide of the war was turning disastrously against Japan, forcing them to adopt desperate measures. Their only hope of preventing defeat was to destroy or at least cripple America's capital ships. Most critically, their aircraft carriers. Attacking the ships with conventional means was deemed too costly and ineffective for Japan's diminishing resources. Thus, taking young, highly trained pilots, loading their planes with explosives, and ordering them to suicide missions was considered the better strategy. The men chosen for this strategy were not random individuals, but some of the most gifted pilots in Japan. The training was harsh, but culturally, kamikaze pilots were revered and provided with much better rations. Pilots were expected to engage in intense self-reflection on the nature of death to prepare them for their ultimate mission. Yet, for some, this preparation and intense patriotism was still not enough to commit to crashing into a US warship. So, what was the established protocol for failed kamikaze pilots? Many were shot down before reaching their target, or missed completely and plummeted into the ocean. Providing they survived the crash into the water, they would be captured and taken to a prisoner of war camp. There is a common misconception that kamikaze pilots were given only half a tank of fuel to ensure they could return. This is historically untrue. Pilots were allowed to return due to legitimate, confirmed reasons. Losing a well-trained kamikaze pilot to a simple malfunction would be an unjustifiable waste of valuable assets. The entire kamikaze strategy was adopted precisely because Japan's resources, including pilots, had become extremely limited. Consequently, pilots who returned because of technical issues or severe bad weather faced no immediate consequences. They would simply be told, "Better luck next time," and there was always going to be a next time. Those who returned due to less easy to confirm reasons, such as heavy enemy resistance or inability to find the target, would be chastised. The number of these highly suspicious cases was mitigated by undertaking kamikaze attacks in organized groups. Additionally, providing pilots with alcohol before takeoff was a tactic to dull their natural instinct for self-preservation. However, when only a single survivor returned after a group mission, it undoubtedly created deep suspicion. Despite the suspicion, kamikaze pilots were still seen as valuable resources, which Japan desperately needed to utilize. Thus, typically no severe punishment was dealt, they were simply sent out again. Nevertheless, there was an unspoken limit to how many times a pilot could return without facing severe consequences. For example, one known pilot returned an astonishing 9 times before he was eventually executed for cowardice. For the majority of pilots, returning from a suicide mission was, to a certain extent, an expected possibility. In most instances, returning was not an offense that would automatically result in imprisonment or execution. Given the scarcity of resources during World War II, Japan had to conserve and make the best use of its talented kamikaze pilots. This pragmatism was essential if Japan was to compete with the overwhelming industrial might of the United States. Considering that a single kamikaze hit could put an aircraft carrier out of commission for months, they were viewed as a resource not to be wasted. This strategic conservation is the primary reason why returning kamikaze pilots were not often severely punished.